I died the 5th year of my marriage while my husband was spending his birthday with his first love. When a doctor called to inform him of my death, he thought it was a hoax. Hard to update. The line went dead, plunging the room into silence. Catherine, who'd overheard everything, avoided eye contact, clearly hiding something. Still, she draped her arms around Terry's neck and murmured, "Wendy's getting crafty, huh? First the cancer excuse to bring you home, then those frantic calls, and now faking her own death. You're not buying it, right?" Terry's doubts evaporated as he processed Catherine's words. Stroking her hair gently, he replied, "Of course not. She's playing with fire, using lies like that. Invisible and heartbroken, I have it above them. I'd never lied to Terry. He just refused to believe me. If loving him meant death, so be it." Terry stared at our wedding photo, his forehead creased in thought. Finally he sighed. How did she change so much? She used to be kind and genuine. He dialed my number repeatedly, met only with silence. With each unanswered call, his conviction grew, clearly assuming I was dodging the divorce. His patience wore thin. He looked ready to have me dragged back to sign the papers. Catherine, oddly enough, was the voice of reason. "Terry, we need to make Wendy face her mistakes. Her sick mother in the hospital, that's her weak spot. Cut off the medical payments and she'll come crawling back to apologize." I stared in disbelief at Catherine's cruelty, watching the conflict in Terry's eyes. "I prayed you would remember our years together and not act so ruthlessly." "Terry, Madame Lowe's been in treatment for so long. A day or two won't make a difference," Catherine persisted. I couldn't understand why she hated me so much that she'd even target my mother. But what happened next plunged me into despair. After a moment's contemplation, Terry locked eyes with Catherine and said, "You're right. It's time she learned her lesson." Without hesitation, he called the hospital and cut off my mother's medical funding. I watched in horror, falling to my knees begging. But he couldn't see or hear me, blind to my tears and deaf to my pleas. Panic and despair consumed my soul. My mother had recently been in critical condition, barely pulled back from the brink. She needed proper care now more than ever. But Terry had never paid attention to these details, seemingly bewitched by Catherine. I had stayed with Terry not just out of love, but because the Shane family covered the steep medical bills. I couldn't risk losing that. But their actions now hurt more than death itself, breeding hatred in my heart. In our youth, the Lowe and Shane families were close. My mother had treated Terry like her own son. How could he be so heartless now? Satisfied with the outcome, Catherine's smile grew smugger as she coaxed Terry into my bedroom. When he wasn't looking, she even removed our wedding photo from the living room wall, tossing it into the storage room. But none of that mattered to me anymore. My mind raced, consumed with worry for my mother's safety. I watched Terry and Catherine's blissful moment, feeling numb. Even in death, the pain in my soul left me restless. Terry seemed to have forgotten about me and my critically ill mother entirely, lost in his romance with Catherine as they shopped for wedding dresses. At the Shane Group's bridal shop, the staff eagerly greeted Terry. "Mr. President, choosing a gown for your wife? We haven't seen her in a while. How's her health?" I smiled bitterly. Even this stranger knew about my illness, while my husband thought I was lying. The irony was painful. Everyone knew who wife meant, and Catherine's face darkened. Before she could react, Terry frowned. "Did Wendy put you up to this?" he asked the confused assistant, cutting her off before she could respond. "Whatever trick she's using, remember who really runs Shane Group." He stormed out, dragging Catherine along. My heart ached, though I was already numb to the pain. I felt worthless, but with my mother in the hospital, I had no choice but to endure. As they approached another store, Terry's phone rang. He brightened, probably hoping I was calling to apologize. Seeing it was his mother, he looked disappointed. He answered, and Linda Shane's angry voice came through. "Terry, what's going on?" "The doctor says you've cut off Wendy's mother's medical funding." Terry chuckled, unconcerned. "So what? How long will you hold that old debt over me? Isn't marrying her daughter enough? Want to burden me for life?" I stood there, stunned, as if I'd never known this man. Linda's voice grew more furious. "You monster, Wendy's mother is critical. Get to the hospital now." Terry finally grasped the gravity of the situation and rushed to the hospital. I followed, my heart racing. At the hospital, Lindy unleashed her fury on Terry, berating him harshly. Catherine's attempts to defend him were swiftly shut down. "Where's Wendy?" Linda demanded, clearly unable to reach me and visibly irritated by Catherine's presence. Terry sneered, "Wendy, she's the ungrateful one, abandoning her own mother to avoid our divorce." I didn't. My soul cried out in vain, racked with an indescribable pain. Why was I still tethered to this world? As Linda raised her hand to slap Terry, a young doctor burst in. "Are you Wendy's family?" he asked. Terry nodded, confused. "Miss Lowe passed away from cancer yesterday morning. We need her family to claim the body," the doctor explained solemnly. Terry's breath hitched, but his voice remained cold. "Impossible. I saw her a month ago. Stop this charade and bring Wendy out now, or you'll regret it." Terry's threat fell flat. My death was irrefutable. The doctor, now visibly annoyed, replied, "If you don't believe me, sir, her body is in the morgue downstairs." A tense silence filled the corridor. Terry's composure finally cracked. Abruptly, he released Catherine's hand and bolted downstairs.
Now you can watch the second part by pressing share and more.